Welcome to the Sport Exchange with me, John Robbie. Hi guys, it's John Robbie here. Welcome to the Sport Exchange podcast where we meet celebrities and personalities from different sports. We hear their stories, the good, the bad and the ugly, and learn how they deal with the transition from playing to enjoying the rest of their lives. Each week I'll discuss my most recent article and we hope to have a lot of fun. Enjoy. Hi guys, John Robbie here. Welcome to the latest of the Sport Exchange podcast. Today we welcome a man who'll never be forgotten in the world of rugby and indeed in the world of sport because of one incredible moment. Former Springbok fly half and founder and director of Pivotal Capital, Joel Stransky. Joel, hi, welcome.
John, thanks very much. Nice to be on the show.
I was going to say remembered for one incident, but nowadays, is it winning the World Cup with that drop goal or falling off your bicycle during the Cape Epic?
I think it's more using my face as a break at the Cape Epic last year, but thank goodness that's behind us, and we had a good epic this year, so hopefully people are forgetting about the little tumble.
What is it in cycling? Because I've only realised just how hard completing the Cape Epic, but also getting a podium finish. I mean, compare that to playing professional rugby in terms of effort and achievement.
Yeah, so I think that's why rugby players quite like cycling, because there's definitely a bit of suffering involved. You know, it's almost like constant pre-season training, and it's hard and it's tough. But most importantly, it's challenging oneself. You know, you're riding sometimes with a partner, but normally you're riding against a mountain or you against the clock. And I think there's some value system inside all of us that, all the rugby players certainly, that have helped us achieve success, that motivate us and drive us to do something silly like cycling again.
How important is fitness to you?
It's absolutely everything, I think, because it's the foundation for me. It gives me happiness. It makes me feel good about myself. I wake up on a great note because I get up, go ride my bike, come to work in a good spirit, in a good mood, so that, it rubs off on my family, on the staff here in our offices. So it's of paramount importance.
And seriously, in terms of business performance, in terms of sharpness, intellectual level, etc. I mean, as a serious question for a businessman, somebody involved in a business career or a career where you have to use your brain, how important is it?
Well, so there's some very interesting research, and in fact, I heard about a TED Talk today. I haven't seen it, but I was told about it by a friend of mine who does Ironman as well, who a lady by the name of Wendy Suzuki, and she studies the neurosciences around sport and around how it does. There's 3 great benefits, which include smarter, faster thinking, feeling good about yourself, brain power, everything you can imagine, plus all the healthy side of it. So I think it is vitally important. I know from my side that when I'm not training, when I'm injured or I'm tapering or resting, I don't feel like I'm functioning at 100%. So I think it wakes me up. I come here refreshed, I've stimulated, and a healthy mind is driven by a healthy body 99% of the time.
And what about growing old gracefully, like me?
So I've come to realize you are far from old to start with. But I've come to realize I think you get old when you stop doing things. You don't stop doing things when you get old. You get older when you stop doing those things that you love doing.
Gee, you've got some great sayings. I can see a book coming out here. Tell us about Pivotal Capital. I've spoken to you before. I know it's about recruitment. I know it's about using cutting-edge technology to match the right people to the right job, so you don't waste time interviewing the wrong people. Tell us a little bit about that and how exciting is it for you?
So our business started 7 years ago, and it started in the voice biometric space. We realized there was a market here for mobile authentication, remote authentication, and we started OneVault, and a great product, great solution, being rolled out by some of the banks now, some of the telcos, and that was our first business. And then all our businesses from there ended up playing in that call center space, because it is very much a solution that's used as an authentication process in the call center space. So everything we did from there became a value-added service to that client base. Yeah. And ultimately the technology became a much bigger part of our business than anything else. So our biggest business is Pivotal Data, which plays in the hosted telephony side of call centers and IPPBX. We're a Genesis partner. We have a fantastic service desk. We have 25 top engineers working for us now. And then to your point, we have a recruitment business and an artificial intelligence business, an analytics business. So it started. We even for our sons have a small security business and a cleaning business because they add value to our call center business. So
I love the way it trips off the tongue. All this business stuff. I mean, it's fantastic, and yet I almost feel you should be talking about first phase ball and second phase ball and going around the corner and skill sets and all that sort of stuff. But being serious, and I've seen you quoted before as saying there's a side of you regrets not going into professional coaching. If I could offer you now a different path and say you now would be, for example, the new Springbok coach instead of Rassie, as opposed to what you're doing, would you take it?
Yes and no. Yes and no. And so the no part of me is driven by the fact that I don't think you can look at life and harbour regrets. I think you've got to understand that there are new goals and new challenges, and you got to keep moving forward. You can't live in the past thinking I should have done things differently, because you end up stuck in the past then, and you end up without a future. And I think from that perspective, the answer would be no. But the other side of me that says yes is one that is driven by the fact that there is nothing more rewarding in life than to mentor or coach someone and to see them succeed.
Tell us about the little 12-year-olds. I think you had a little backline you looked at once, didn't you?
Exactly. So I've had some incredible little things, and it was back in my playing days still when I lived in Cape Town. I went and coached, I think it was the Sax under 13 team, and they were playing against Western Province Prep School. And we did one backline move. We did some handling skills, and we did some ideas and straight running. We did one backline move, and they scored with that move and won the game 5-0. And it was their biggest victory in a long time. And just to see the guys handle the ball that well, to execute the move perfectly, to score the try and celebrate, the most rewarding thing. And I helped coach a little bit at the Saints Rugby Festival this year. Not that it helped, because Maritzburg College were really suffering. But they were much better in the game where I spent time with them, and then unfortunately I couldn't spend time with them before the next game. But my wife said to me, she said, I stood on the side and watched you with those kids. You should be coaching. Yeah. When she says that to me, and she knows me better than anyone else in the whole world, then I look at it and I go, well, maybe I should have. Maybe I should have stuck at it instead of embarking on a career.
What about the modern game? I mean, without sounding like an old fart now, most of the people from my generation, and even your generation, look at the game today. For all its wonderful professionalism, for all the benefits, the conditioning, the fitness, the everything. And you look at the lack of space, you look at the repetition of it all, etc. And it's almost become a cliche to say, I'm glad I'm not playing today. How do you feel about it? Would you like to be playing now?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I love the game. I'd still love to be playing. I'd like to think that if I was playing, we'd maybe do things a little bit differently. And maybe that's... But I do look at it, and I can't agree with you more. It is very predictable. The teams that do things brilliantly are doing it very much similar to other people, but they just do it better and they win games. But the game has become very predictable, and it is a problem. And the tournaments are predictable. It's it's the same story over and over again. It might be slightly different nuance, but it is a bit predictable at the moment. And so to hear rumours or stories going around today about the Super Rugby changing again and the US maybe coming in, and it concerns me, because I don't think the focus is in the right place. The tournament will be just as dull and boring if the game's the same, and we need to think about how we can make this game much, much better again and bring the crowds back in, because the viewership is down, the crowds are voting with their feet, they're not going to the games. It is predictable, it's physical and hard, and it's demanding, and that is fantastic, but it's also highly predictable.
I love it when they say fly half who takes the ball to the line, and you see a fly half who's built like a lock forward in our day taking it up. What do you feel when you see that? I mean, I often say I never had the benefit of full weightlifting and conditioning. Yeah. I'd love to have known how far I could got. Do you have similar thoughts?
No, not from that perspective. So I mean, I look at a fly half who takes it to the line. I don't think you have to be a big guy to take it to the line, because when some of the smallest players on the field right now are the most dangerous, because they're much more nimble than some of the big guys.
Damian McKenzie.
I was about to say Damian McKenzie. Player, eh? And he's less than 80 kgs, and Aaron Cruden was the same, So you don't have to be big to play. Aaron Smith, you scrum off in the cauldron of physicality. He's unbelievable. So I don't think you have to be enormous. I think it helps to be big. And if you don't have that skill set of the smaller guys, you definitely want to be big. But some of the little guys take it to the line and they keep 2 or 3 defenders busy and they still create space out wide. So maybe it's not all about brawn.
We're talking to Joel Stransky. What was it like going from amateur to professional? I mean, I remember talking to Kubas Visa, and I was his first captain for Transvaal when he arrived with a big beard and shaggy hair from the Western Transvaal. And he was a trainee, he was a student and a trainee.
A mullet.
Teacher.
I think he had a mullet.
A mullet, yeah. We never called them mullets in those days, but they were mullets apparently. And he suddenly said, here he was single, he playing for the Springboks and winning World Cups, and suddenly has more money than he'd ever dreamt of in his life. Tell us what it was like for you, because you were a little bit more experienced. You'd played in Italy and France, which, let's be honest, was semi-professional before we had it over there. That changeover, what was it like for you as a player?
So I think it was quite tough. So and maybe for me it was a little tougher because I was on the players committee and we were going through that whole process of fighting for players' rights.
And that made you unpopular, didn't it?
Well, certainly with the coach and with some of the administrators, and it was a turbulent time. And ultimately, when I left the shores and went to the UK, I think was probably where I went into that scenario of just playing rugby, just going to training in the morning and coming home and having lunch with my 6-month-old daughter and my wife, and then going back to training and coming back and taking her for a walk in the park, and albeit in the freezing park in the UK. But I think for me that's when I found myself in that situation. But that initial transition from amateur into professionalism I think it was quite tough for us, and especially from a timing perspective, because it was just after the Rugby World Cup. We'd gone from just this rugby players who wanted to play the game to being national heroes and icons. I think it went to some of our heads, to be quite honest. We didn't play all that well for a little while, and we got caught in the politics of the game and all off the field stuff. I don't think it was an easy transition.
Tell us about Louie Late, because I remember, he was this incredible achiever, and yet could be the most arrogant, vindictive, nasty piece of work. And you remember he wouldn't even call Francois Pienaar. He called him Pienaar when it looked like you were going to go with Harry Falloon and the Rebel Circus, etc., before rugby went professional. What sort of relationship did you have with King Louie?
So I'll tell you 3 very quick stories about King Louie, because after the World Cup, I spoke at a media breakfast in Camps Bay. And I lived in Claremont, and I mentioned his name 3 times in my speech. The first time I mentioned him, I said he was quite hard and difficult. The second time was like in neutral, and the third time I mentioned his name was praising him enormously, saying, the Rugby World Cup was brilliant. The way the game was administered was strong but fair, and rugby was in great shape because of him. When I got home, he already had left 3 messages on the phone at home saying, "Why did you mention mine? What did you say about me?" So he knew everything, that man. We talk about data in this modern world and knowledge being, the key to all decisions. He knew everything. He had everyone's phones tapped, and I know for a fact Edward Griffiths arrived. He used to live around the corner from me in Cape Town. He arrived one Sunday night. It was about 11:15. I was in bed sleeping, and he buzzed the gate, and we were like in a panhandle, and I opened the gate, and he came up. He said, and he walked there because he lived around the corner. He said, "I'm really sorry to come to your house here in the middle of the night, Joel, but I just need to use your phone." I said, "Sure."
Kidding.
Yeah. I said, "Sure, Edward, it's over there." He said, "No, I need some privacy." I said, "Well, go through to the study there. There's another one in the study." He went through to the study, and he came out about 10 minutes later. I'd boiled the kettle. I made him a coffee. I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "No, I had my phone checked on John Robbie's advice."
Oh wow! Yes,
and my phone.
That.
And my phone is bugged at home.
Yeah.
He said, "Dr. Late is repeating the things I said on my phone word for word."
Isn't that extraordinary?
Absolutely extraordinary. About 2 days later, he phoned me. He said, "You need to have your phone checked." So Doc Late, he knew. He had guys working for him in the post office, or Telcom, whatever it was. He knew everything.
And yet, he's a top businessman. Did you?
Top businessman.
I find that appalling. I find that revolting. And yet, you, as someone who's gone into business, as somebody now, supposedly an ethical business, a businessman, how do you feel about that?
Well, so there's 2 sides to Doc Late. I think he was a hard man and difficult and a bully. He was probably the easiest way to describe him, as a complete bully. But in the same breath, in his tenure as head of SA Rugby, we won the World Cup. With the Lions won Super Rugby. It was a period where SA Rugby made hobbles of cash.
Yeah.
So he was a great administrator, and whatever he did well. He may have bullied people, and there may have been other people who
Does
fell by the way.
Does the end justify the means?
No,
That's what I'm getting at.
Not always.
Yeah.
But you've got to also accept that there were things he did that were unbelievable. And as much as there was some bad, which we don't respect and we dislike enormously, and there was a lot of that bad, you've got to also say, look, give credit where it's due.
Yeah,
there were things he did fantastically well. And in fact, one of the things he taught me, it was post my rugby career when he was still involved with SA Rugby and I was working for George Rodenbach and Megapro. I went to see him about SA Rugby rights and everything, and we had a lunch somewhere not far from Ellis Park there in Braamfontein. And at the end of the lunch, he said, I'll write the minutes and send them to you. I said, no, don't worry, Doc, I'll do that. He said, no. He said, let this be a lesson to you, my boy. He said, in business, always write your own minutes.
Yeah.
Because then it's your interpretation, not someone else's. And it's an unbelievable lesson.
Yeah.
It's an unbelievable lesson.
Do you know who called him King Louie first?
Was it you?
It was. And he loved it because he thought of Louis XIV.
Yeah.
And I was always terrified that one day his grandkids, he'd take them to see the Jungle Book. Because do you remember the big orangutan that used to sing, I Want to Be Like You? Guess what he was called?
Was he Louis?
King Louis.
King
Louis. But that's something. Anyway, talking about the late, great Louis Late. Tell us about the Rugby World Cup final. Tell us about Kitch Christie. Because, legendary coach, etc. Wonderful. I always found him the most boring man. I could never talk to him about anything but rugby. He had a delivery. He was singing. I just found him the most boring man. I loved him to bits, etc. How did he succeed in the World Cup? I mean, let's go back, not with history now. Let's go back to where you were. Everyone thought the Australians were going to win the World Cup. They were favourites beforehand. All Blacks would be second. South Africa might make the quarterfinals.
Yeah. So I think Kitch succeeded because Kitch ate, drank, slept, dreamed, thought, lived rugby, which is why it was the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and number 5 topic of conversation in his life. And because he was so deep on the game, he understood the game unbelievably well, and he understood, more importantly, the strengths and weaknesses of the players. And most importantly, he understood his own strengths and weaknesses. And I think that would probably be why he was so successful, because he got the best out of the likes of James Smalley. He understood James was a different type of human being.
Well, I was going to say, look at the characters in that team. It was right across the spectrum.
Exactly. He got the best out of all the different characters. He understood how best they needed to play. He understood the game plan that would suit them. He understood them and understood how to get the best out of them on a personal note. And most importantly, knowing his own strengths and weaknesses, he surrounded himself by people who could fill those gaps. The likes of Morné du Plessis, who became the fatherly figure and the more...
he was almost the go-between between you and the coach, wasn't he?
So he was the fatherly figure, the one who spoke nicely to you, who didn't deliver in the same monotone, go and do this is what you need to do. Ray Mort brought in the hardness in defence, which he wasn't allowed to be with us during the World Cup, but certainly in the build-up to the World Cup. And defence was a huge part of our game plan. And the skills, the backs, the forwards, he surrounded himself with people who were able to fulfill his prophecy and deliver it to the players and get them to buy into it. And most importantly, he understood the game. So he read the opposition. He knew what needed to be done. He knew how his team needed to do it, understanding their strengths and weaknesses. And at the end of the day, to your point, he may not have had the greatest delivery, but we all loved him. And we all would have gone to war for him every single day of the week and twice on Sundays.
What is it about that? Because, I've had coaches who shout and scream. I've had coaches who are eloquent. I've had coaches who are almost, monosyllabic.
Yeah.
And yet there's something that just you trust. As you say, you end up loving them. What is it about that? And what lessons are there for life, for business in general? Honesty, maybe?
I think it is honesty. It's integrity. It's wisdom. It's but I think most importantly it's respect. I think it's how they deal with you as a human being, and then it's that combination of everything else that is behind that. Because someone can be unbelievably respectful, but if they not saying things that make sense, you're not going to respect their opinion. So I think it is all those things combined. But most importantly, I think it's about respect, mutual respect.
Yeah. Tell us about setbacks, because I remember when you went to Leicester, and it was fantastic. I mean, Leicester was a real rugby club. It was a marvellous place, Welford Road, and the people who were involved. I mean, I remember playing with and against a lot of them. And then, of course, coming to the end of the career, and it all went horribly wrong with Bristol. What actually happened?
Yeah, so I got injured to start with, which was probably where it started going wrong.
What age were you now? Just 30?
I was 30.
Yeah.
And picked up a serious knee injury, and I had surgery and tried to come through it, and eventually they realised there was some bone damage and that it was going to be the end of a professional career. And I was already player coach and part of a coaching team that included Dean Richard and John Wells, and I don't know if you saw on the weekend, they're part of the Newcastle coaching team that beat Leicester on the weekend, which was quite interesting. But it was a strange setup because Dean Richards was manager of rugby and John Wells and I were co-coaches, and it was cool and it was all working and we were achieving great success. But John Wells was really conservative, Dean Richards quite conservative, and I was the fly if we wanted to play the game. So as much as it all worked, there were moments which were a little frustrating. And then Bob Dwyer, who was the director of rugby at Bristol, phoned me and said, "Come down to Bristol and be the head coach." I said, "I am in. That sounds like a great challenge."
And Bristol was like a sleeping giant. They hadn't been doing so well, and they wanted to get back to the top.
They were, I think, sort of bottom 5 in the Premiership, but a team with potential, a couple of good players, and they had a good benefactor who was throwing money at the club. And so I resigned at Leicester. I gave notice, said at the end of the season I'm leaving. I was completely transparent with them, and to be fair, Peter Wheeler said to me, "Look," and Dean Richards, "Look, we know you're going to Bristol, but we know your blood is green and red and white here, and there's no point in leaving now. Carry on, finish the season with us." And I finished the season. I went down to Bristol and we started looking for a house and bought a car, and because I had to give back my sponsored car. And I had to come home for a couple of weeks while they applied for my work permit. And I came home and phoned and waited, and eventually Bob Dwyer said to me, "Look, there's a drama here at the club." And it turned out he'd had a fallout with the CEO, who then said, "You haven't got a signed contract with Stransky. There's no place for him here until you're gone. And so, just tell him he's not welcome." And, I started coaching already. We'd had sessions of the team. So I flew back to the UK on a tourist visa and went with Bob to see an attorney. And the attorney said, "Look, you need to sue the club. It just can't work." So I ended up suing the club and taking them to, it ended up in the British High Court, the judge with a wig and everything.
But how did you feel as a youngster? Because we know legal costs, you can win the case and end up bankrupting yourself.
John, it was horrendous. So the stress was incredible. I had a great attorney, to be fair. I was guided by one of the attorneys who represented the British Barbarians, and he gave me some real good advice, and he was very helpful, good friend of Bob's. And we appointed a barrister who fought the case on a no-win, no-fee basis. And we won the case. And
did that make you rich?
It did not. I can tell you, I got paid out £60,000, which in the greater scheme was not a lot. It was less than 1/3 of the value of the contract, but it was all that Bristol could afford without declaring insolvency.
Yeah.
So for me, it was never about the money. It was about saying you had a handshake and a contract.
But that's a brave thing for a newly married guy.
But you got to stand up for what's right, don't you?
Yeah.
And I stood up for what was right, and it was risky, and it was.
Because you also got screwed in business over here, didn't you, by someone who went to jail? There was a story about somebody who swindled you, etc. Can you tell us about that?
It was some of that money in the UK that was. It was some of my rugby money. So it was the guy who was managing my investments. He took some cash, and I think it was more of a Ponzi scheme that he didn't tell me about. And lost some money. So he's in jail, but that's okay. He went to jail.
You've made mistakes along the way. What about business? I mean, have you had setbacks in business as well?
Oh, we always have setbacks. Every day there's a win and a loss. You take the losses on the chin, you get up, and you keep going.
And is that what you learned from rugby, or is that just your own philosophy?
So I think you do learn a lot about it from the game of rugby, because in the game you get injured and you lose games, and you get tackled and you soar and you get up and make the next tackle, or you make the next carry. So you do. Life is about taking the good with the bad and how you react to the tough times. But I think there are times where in business when it's all very well to say you learn from taking a heavy tackle and you stand up again. When you lose some cash in the business, it's a little bit different. When you have to write out a personal check to pay salaries at the end of the month, it's a little different than standing up and
Have you done that?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure.
Do you like corporate or entrepreneurial? Because they're different, aren't they?
They're very different. So both have their pros and cons. Corporate, you get a salary at the end of the month.
Yeah.
You, if you deliver, you get a bonus at the end of the year and maybe some more share options. Entrepreneurial, you don't need to fill out a leave form and you can go watch your kids play sport and you can go do the Cape Epic and ride your bike when you want. But come the end of the month, if you know you've had a bad month, you write a check to pay your staff salary and you're the last person to draw a salary, by the way. And to be quite frank, we've plowed every cent we've made back into our businesses. So I haven't had a salary increase or a bonus in 6 years. So those are the pros and cons.
What advice would you give to a young player? Because nowadays, to get a professional contract is hell of a tough.
Yeah.
Just to get that signature there. And then when you're in it, it's a rat race to make your way into the first team at whatever.
Yeah.
Then you've got agents. Then you've got to look after yourself. Then people are wanting you to play in Japan, etc., etc., etc. And you turn around twice and your career is over. And we all know top players in soccer and rugby and all sports who are on the bones of their backside. Given that your knowledge of sport, of professional sport, the birth of professional sport, being successful, transforming into a rugby career, what would be your advice to some young rugby players listening to this?
So firstly, what concerns me is I don't always think it is hard to get a contract. For those players who find it really hard to get a contract, they are forced at a very young age to embark on a second career. Yeah. Which is good because they don't become the journeymen of rugby, those lost souls who have nothing else to fall back on, 10 years later. For me, those guys who get a contract and who don't make it, that is the worrisome, era of rugby player for me. Those guys who sign up with the Bulls as a 16-year-old at school and who paid a small fee and then they go to the Bulls or whichever union it is as a 19-year-old and all of a sudden there's 60 players they're competing with for a place in the Blue Bulls under 20 side or the Western Province under 20 side, and they can't get in that side, and then they go play for, with all respect, the SV Deer or the Falca for 6 years, and then 6 years later
they got three kids and they maybe haven't got a house bought yet,
and they're paying rent and they've got a sponsored car which they could never afford, and ultimately their career comes to an end, and they in your words, they turn around twice and it's all over, and they've got nothing to show for it and nowhere to go. Those are the guys I worry about enormously in our game. And for me, the only bit of advice I would say is it doesn't matter if you are the guy who's battling to get a contract, the youngster who's got a contract and who might not make it, or the Victor Matfield, Brian Abana, Adrian Strauss. Make sure that when your time of running around on the rugby field is up, is that you have somewhere to go. Whether it's a degree, a family business, or somewhere, you've got to have a career.
So you don't retire from something, you retire to something.
Exactly.
And I mean, you've always said, it's funny, I didn't complete a master's at Cambridge, and it's my greatest regret. Yeah. You've also said you didn't complete your degree.
I didn't, and that is my greatest regret.
And do you have time? Why didn't you do it now?
So I'm sort of at that point in life where I thought about it. I actually have thought about it, and I probably, with the work experience, I could probably go and do an MBA or something a little different to just a normal degree. I have thought about it. I have considered it, and there's still a part of me that wants to do it. But I also understand that I'm at a place in life where I love riding my bicycle. Yeah. I love swimming and running. I'm going to do. I've set different goals. Next year, I want to do. I'm calling it the big endurance 3. I want to do epic Ironman and comrades and raise money for my charity. Yeah. So when I look at those desires and those needs, I know that if push came to shove on a Wednesday evening, am I going to do 2 hours of work towards my degree, or am I going to go swim 2Ks? I'm probably going to go and swim because that's what I want to do. That's deep down inside where my passion lies. So right now it's not the right time to do it. I'm still really young and I can still go ride my bike.
A lot of people, have said to me unbelievably, from talking about the 95 heroes, and they were heroes, not just rugby players, they were heroes in the country, that there's almost a bitterness towards Francois and perhaps you, because Francois has obviously leveraged that fame and has done incredibly well. And you're the same. The man who scored the drop goal, you're on television, etc. Some of the other guys who perhaps have done less well, and we know there are some who've battled in various ways and so on. Are you still a team, or is there that jealousy, bitterness there? Answer that as honestly as you can.
So I would like to think that bitterness is not aimed at me in any way. I'd be bitterly disappointed if it was.
Yeah.
But I do understand, and I do know that we probably aren't the close team that we used to be.
Yeah.
And we're not, because I think Francois has gone about things in a way which may not have been totally respected by the bulk of that team.
Really?
And
could you be more specific?
Well, I'd rather not drag out the dirty laundry, but I think if I understand a lot of the guys, I think in many ways everyone still loves Francois and they see him as captain, but I think there is certainly, if there were any bitterness or any doubts towards Francois, it would be about how he went about things post rugby, in that transition into professionalism, the Packer versus Piscabi contracts, the Invictus. There's a number.
Left a few people, perhaps. He left a few people who said, "Stick together and we'll win," and then he went the other way. Is that fair?
That's probably fair.
Yeah,
100% fair.
In terms of the World Cup, again, looking back, are you glad now to have moved on a little bit? I mean, I said jokingly that, we know you, of course, anyone of a certain age know you, but maybe youngsters, Joel's the guy on the television now. Joel's the guy. Did he really kick that, that goal, etc.? Because I remember
Joel's the guy who fell off his bike.
Fell off his bicycle, correct. But I remember you once were quoted as saying when John Smith's team won, you almost thought, oh, thank goodness, somebody else can now take over the mantle. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think to your point, you've got to move on in life. You've got to set new goals and new dreams and new ambitions, and you can't look back and worry about who benefited most from 1995 and who's angry or bitter or who's doing what now. I think life is about stepping forward, and for me sometimes I think some of the players have found it hard to move forward. I think they have lived a little bit in the past, and to your point earlier about Butch James having won the World Cup and said, what else can you do once you've run out in front of 80,000 people?
You can get a job, but how do you get one that compares with that?
Compares that is so passionate, that inspires you as much as that. And I understand that, but life is about moving on. You can't live in the past. You've got to step forward. And sometimes it's easier when someone else has done something that becomes the focus of attention, as opposed to the focus still being on something you did 20 or 30 years ago. And maybe that was what I was referring to when John Smith and his team won the World Cup in 2007. And we wanted them to win it, and it was unbelievable that they did. And in a sense, I think some of the players might feel, took away a little bit of the glory of the 95 team, but it didn't, because the 95 team will always be the team that were the first to win the World Cup, that did it with Madiba there on home soil. John Smith and his team will always be the team that did it in France under tough circumstances away from home. It's two very different scenarios, but certainly the fact that there are two teams that have now won the World Cup does share that I suppose the pressure of life in some ways.
Yeah. Regrets looking back?
Well, certainly that I didn't finish my degree.
Yeah. Anything else from business? From the transition?
Yeah, so I do. I used to be quite trusting until that bastard stole my cash.
Do you want to name him?
Well, he's lives in the UK.
Right. Do you want to name him?
No,
okay.
He's in jail.
Okay.
He can rot there for all I care.
Yeah.
So, I was probably a bit trusting. I think, other than that...
That's worrying, that you're not trusting. I'm someone who, my wife said, I trust too many people. And it's sort of worrying, as I would call you a hard-nosed businessman now. You don't trust until it's covered by a lawyer.
No. So I'll do a deal on a handshake.
Yeah.
I'll definitely do a deal on a handshake, and there's no doubt about that. I don't think it's trusting from that perspective, but I will ask 500 questions as opposed to taking someone's word on face value. Ambitions, I would love for us to grow this business into something quite large, and maybe
Dimension Data.
Offload. No, not that big. that large comes with bigger headaches. They say small children, small problems, and I think we'd love to, realize some of the effort and time and cash we put into this business at some point. And then, as I said, next year I want to raise money for my charity. I love seeing the kids benefit. And
tell us about the charity. What is it?
So my charity is the Lumahawk Foundation, and Lumahawk came from a luminous Mohican hair thing I used to wear on my helmet when I first started doing the Cape Epic.
Yeah.
And we've raised we probably raised 500,000 or 600,000 rand a year, and every single cent goes to the underprivileged kids and their educational needs. As a business, we pick up all administrative costs.
Yeah.
We have sponsors who pay for kit and things like that if we don't pay for it ourselves. So every cent we raise goes to the kids. And, we raise money by getting people to participate. We don't ask for grants or just, it's not a matter of, give us cash so we can send a kid to school. It's about saying, come do something special with us. We'll create an incredible environment, a great experience. And the money that we raise by creating that experience is going to do some fantastic work. And it's wonderful to spend time with the kids and see the product of our work. And most importantly, to see some of the youngsters who will be the future leaders of this country, the captains of industry, doing so well at school, at high school, at university.
Fantastic.
And making a difference.
Tell us something nobody knows about Joel Stransky. I love asking that question.
So I'll tell you...
I mean, nobody. Tell us something nobody knows about
Nobody
you.
knows.
Yeah.
Well, my wife would know.
Yeah. Okay, well, tell us something a lot of people wouldn't know.
So I think most people have this perception that I'm an extrovert and that, you talk on TV and you're involved in a business and you're out there all the time. I'm a proper introvert and I love being alone.
Really?
The best time of day for me is when I can go and have my swim in the pool with no one talking to me, or be on the watt bike and sweating and training hard by myself. I ride a lot with Andrew McLean, who's also quiet. When we ride, we don't talk. It's heavenly. I'm very quiet, very introvert, but I have learned that in certain environments, if you want to drive your business and you want to sell, and whether we like it or not, we are all salespeople in this world. You've got to be out there and you've got to be able to talk, and so I've learned how to do that. But I love my own company. And it's not that I think I'm great and I want to spend time with just me. It's just I like being alone.
All right, well, Joel, we're going to leave you alone now. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us on the Sport Exchange.
Only with pleasure, John. Thank you for having me.
That was Joel Stransky, wasn't it fascinating? And thanks to Slow in the City for hosting us. Follow us on social media for updates. See you next time.